I want you to know, okay, no secret. Okay.
Yeah,
And what I did was the name of this particular segment of the podcast is Class in Session. And where I am generally the professor, I'm always the student. So I'm learning as much as I am teaching anything. And in
sure.
this particular case, as I began to work at the university and I have all different kinds of students, there are some, and especially because of my age, I'm in my mid 50s. So a lot of these, if not thought presses, but expressions of identity, um, weren't even they just didn't exist in the 70s, 80s, 90s. So
Yeah.
what I try to get people to understand is that not it's not coming from a place of insensitivity, but or even misunderstanding. The presence of this new ideology. If people grew up with it, if you were born in 2000, that's been completely part of your reality your entire life growing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to not have room to process that. Not only do people not understand the new framework within identity and the LGBTQ culture, but it's not even a thought because there are people who identify as genders or I and that or use pronouns that I've never even heard of. And I get a lot that people my age and older aren't trying to understand. And a friend of mine is a superintendent in central Indiana, and that's even a staff problem she has of I believe it's called misgendering from staff to staff. And so I'm just saying, how does one, especially from a professor's perspective, who is not familiar with the new framework of identity, how do you ease your way into this pool when you have so many new people coming at you? How does it work?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, something you said at the very beginning, I think really can teach us a lot, which is that when we teach our classes, we learn a lot from our students. Right? We're often learning just as much from them. It's become cliche to say this, but right, we're learning a lot from our students in addition to them learning from us. And so I think the best way to approach this is really to listen to our students and try to understand how they think about their own identities and that the identities of others. And I think one of the obstacles to doing this that a lot of people face is that gender and sexuality are really important to how we understand the world and how we understand people around us. Um, And of course, a lot of theorists have written about why this is so, but it's one of the ways that we organize the world. And for a lot of people, organizing that world into male and female and gender identities that go along with those biological sexes and thinking about sexuality as gay or straight, that's a really important way that they make sense of the world. And so, with kind of more complicated understandings of gender and sexuality, it challenges that binary world that we've created. So it is difficult for a lot of people to enter into this because they think, look, my whole life I understand people as man and woman. That's the way I understand the world. And you have people saying, well, that doesn't describe me. That's not complicated. That's not complex enough for my identity and my experience. And so I think trying to enter into that, understanding that sometimes we're going to be a little bit fearful, sometimes we're going to be a little bit uncomfortable getting out of the previous ways that we understood the world, getting out of that comfort zone. I think that really goes a long way to, expressing to our students we care about them, we care about their identities, and we want to learn from them.
Okay. Spoiler alert, here come the questions.
Sure.
At what point does subjective reality, my reality, my way of looking at the world, override objective reality, the way the community looks at the world? Okay. There has to be some, I do not know why this is turning yellow. This is bothering me. Okay. I think it's because I have fluorescent lights. I'll probably have to
Um,
open the shade. But we have to have some objective reality, some reality that we agree on as a group, which is how we understand each other. We have to agree on the color blue, right? So when I say blue, you know what blue means. John knows what blue means. Sally knows what blue means, right?
sure.
If I make up my own blue and you make up your own blue, we communication breaks down. So let me try to get this shade. This is driving me crazy. I'm sorry.
Sure. Sure.
All right. This may have helped. All right. So if everyone has their personal version of reality, there is no collective understanding anymore. How do we communicate if everyone's personal reality or view of the world is expected to be the dominant view of the world or equally credible?
Yeah, and I think this might have a lot to do with how much we agree on what objective reality is. And
Okay.
is there an objective reality beyond our own experience of it? I'm not sure there is. I lean more towards the idea that our own subjective experience of reality is reality.
Okay.
Um, but I would say this, if if my reality, or what I'm calling objective reality, is that there are men and there are women, and those gender identity markers correspond to someone's anatomical sex, or what some people call sex assigned at birth, and someone tells me that doesn't describe my reality at all, I think that's something we've got to listen to, because I think their um, perspective, their ideas about what reality are should be taken seriously. So if you talk to trans people, for example, many trans people will tell you, I never felt like the sex that I was assigned at birth, right? That I was assigned male at birth. I felt like I have been a woman my entire life. And now, because of hormone replacement therapy and these kinds of things, I'm able to live my life in the way that I see myself, which is as a woman. I'm able to engage with reality as a woman because I've always felt myself to be a woman. I think that is a legitimate claim to objective reality. This is this person's reality in the world. They function in the world as a woman. So if that requires a little bit of reorientation on my part, um, to say that someone who was assigned male at birth could be a woman, I have space for that. And I think we should have space for that. And I know that that's difficult for some people, but I think I should have space to understand that reality also involves other people's impressions of what that reality is. It doesn't destabilize reality too much for me.
Okay, there's one thing in being kind, all right? There's another thing as accepting it as true, because this being a father of a daughter and a man. I mean, a daughter and a son, a female and a male. There are certain, because mammalian biology has its place in reality. Anatomical um, realities are there, you know, and there are certain things I will never be. I will never be a bird. I will never be a car. I will never be a computer. I can act like a car. I can make the noises. I can position my body like one, or a dog, or a bird, or whatever. But that does not make me that. I am acting like that. And my imagination may tell me I feel like a bird. But because I am not a bird and I will never be a bird, how do I know what a bird feels like? I may feel something. I may feel different. I may feel uncomfortable in my own skin. But because I have never been bird, or a woman in this case, I can never be a woman because of my genetic makeup. I have their XX chromosomes, their XY chromosomes, and those don't change. How would I know what I'm feeling is what a woman feels, because I will never know what a woman feels. That's in raising a daughter. I can tell my son certain things. I can look at him, know kind of what he's developing through. I can go to that. My daughter, there's some areas I have to get mommy to kind of do that, because she went through that and I have never gone through it. I never will go through it. How do we navigate it? Because if it's a matter of respecting you saying, this is how I want you to approach, recognize, and address me, that's cool. That's easy. There's plenty of room in my psyche to say the respectful thing to do is to address you how you would like to be addressed. I got room for that. When you tell me that my reality should have recognized, and my reality should recognize something that is real that technically cannot be. If I have XX chromosomes and I want to be represented as XY chromosomes, that hasn't changed. It's just hasn't changed. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, you are. And I think
Okay.
there's a lot of common ground here. So why don't we start with the common ground? Um, One, I think you've said it exactly right that there's sort of a social component to this. Someone tells you, I use she, her pronouns, and maybe you didn't initially recognize this person as a woman, but she tells you, I identify as a woman, I use she, her pronouns, and you say, okay, I'm gonna use she and her pronouns because that's what you have requested and I respect you as a person. Okay. I think that's wonderful. If we could get more people to just do that, I think that would be wonderful. Um, the other common ground I think you and I have here is that there are some biological realities, okay, that can't be denied. Where I think we might differ is how gender is related to those biological realities. And so here I'm sort of drawing on the work of Judith Butler. So Judith Butler is a gender theorist. She has a really famous book called Gender Trouble. And she argues that gender itself is a social construct. So, biological sex, yeah, people are born with XX or XY chromosomes, although I want to come back to that chromosome question in just a second. But people are born with a certain set of kind of DNA. They're born with certain kinds of bodies, and that those bodies are generally put into two categories, male and female. But that's it. That's as far for Judith Butler, that's as far as biological determinism goes. Everything else that we think about as what a man does and what a woman does are constructed by our culture. And if you look across cultures, different cultures have different ideas about what's masculine behavior and what's feminine behavior. And so if we think about gender itself as a construct, and Judith Butler goes on to say not only is gender a construct, but it's performative. So we learn how to perform our gender. If I'm born assigned male at birth, I'm brought up expected to perform my masculinity in a certain way according to the rules of my culture. If I'm assigned female at birth, I'm brought up expected to perform femininity according to the rules of my culture. If those things are performative, then we're all performing gender. And so you could perform gender in whatever ways you want to. And I think over the last several decades, we've seen this not only with the experiences of trans individuals, I think we see it clearly there, but also changing definitions of masculinity, of what it means to be a man. I would argue that if we looked back into the 1940s and 1950s, our cultural ideas about what it meant to be a masculine man are much different than they are today in 2025. So if we think about gender as performative, I wonder if that might sort of get at what you're asking here. The,
Well,
the other
here,
thing, yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
go ahead. No, 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 go
Well,
ahead, finish.
I was just going to ask, have you had genetic testing to see what your chromosomal makeup is?
Oh my God, just
Not sure exactly what you're asking me. Like, do I know that I'm in XX or XY?
Yeah.
Um,
just assume.
I have had surgeries that I'm sure that was checked into, but I believe it's about 2,000 years of mammalian biology that have concluded that my sex type is aligned with one um, uh, chromosome set, and the female sex type is aligned with the other. So that was something that I did not have a need to do because I had no question in.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the case for most people. We assume that our chromosomal makeup matches our bodies.
Right.
And this is true for most people. However, there are a significant number of people who have the opposite chromosomal makeup. There are men who have XX chromosomes, and there are women who have XY chromosomes. And there are all different explanations for why this happens. We could also go into there are intersex people, right, who have ambiguous genitalia. And so I would say that this division between male and female that we've been kind of assuming during this conversation isn't quite as stark as we like to think it is.
Well, the only thing that I'm saying is there's one thing in making the exception the rule. There are very there is a distinct minority of genetic inconsistencies, but the primary reality is that it's XX or XY. And as far as uh, gender being performative, it has always been. And it's always had a great variant. So again, that hasn't affected reality within manhood or masculinity. We've always had more effeminate men, and we've had more domineering, warmongering men. So we've always had a scale in masculine females and feminine females feminine males and masculine males. But the where I'm saying is the identification, because a woman has masculine traits, that doesn't stop her from being a woman, just as a man having masculine traits doesn't stop him from being a man. Just like if I have a dog that's black, it doesn't change it from being a dog if it's brown. It's still a dog, it's just a different color. Or it's an aggressive dog, or it's a lazy dog, or it's a muscular dog. It's still a dog. So that's not a new dynamic of there being variant in personality or expression. That has always been. But the places never changed. And for the places to be not only change, but that everyone should recognize those places have changed is odd, and it's a hard place to function in.
Well, I wonder if we're just talking about labels here.
Okay, go help
So,
me.
so,
I
so,
may be off.
well, yeah, I'm just wondering, so if there were a masculine presenting woman
Okay,
who wanted to identify as a man,
okay.
it's really just a label that we're talking about. It doesn't really upset reality, does it? If we're just talking about a label that's performative.
And that's a perfect question. And Kenneth, please jump in whenever you feel whenever you feel comfortable, because I want you to bring about the that research you were telling me about the scale of sexuality and identity. I
Yeah.
want you to do that. Uh, but as far as the labels, I told you the labels I'm good with. If you tell me if Kenneth took me to a drag show when I was in London, and everyone there knew me because I was supposed to be best man at his wedding. So I made particular contacts with people that are close to him. Everybody knew to come up to me and say, when I'm in drag, identify me as thus and so. When I'm not in drag, identify me as thus and so. And we had a great time. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't think we had any problems. I loved it. They loved it. I can't wait to see them again. That's not the issue. They knew to explain that to me, as opposed to experiences I've had where someone walked up to me who is who have the genetic and anatomical markers of a female. And I said, yes, ma'am. And they were offended that I did not look beyond what they looked like to address them as to what they think like. So that's a difference. So it's not just a matter of labels, because if you let me know you're like, it's like, because you think it, nothing else matters. And society is supposed to know what you think, beyond the fact you know why people are saying
Well,
ma'am when you prefer sir. You understand? So it's
I
past the
think
label.
that's unfair. Yeah, no, I think that's
Okay.
unfair. I think it's
Okay.
unfair to expect people to automatically know how you identify. I just think that's unfair. That's one of the reasons why we've gotten accustomed to putting our pronouns, right? Including our pronouns so people know, even if we think it's obvious. I sort of think it's obvious most people would identify me as male, as a man. I still put my preferred pronouns are he and him. I still put that on my signature emails. I still tell people that when I introduce myself. Because I think we need to normalize that, because this experience that you're talking about here, I just think that's completely unfair. If I misgender someone because I genuinely didn't know the gender they identify as, I think that's an honest mistake, and I don't think someone should be offended by that.
Okay.
I
Kenneth.
tend to agree with you. Uh, I would having coming in where we are. I'll say that I have accidentally misgendered a lot of people
Me
who are
too.
who are not on this progress. They're not even transitioning from one gender or another. I'm just a person with sometimes some antiquated ideas of what a man look like. And I have accidentally misgendered some of the children of my staff members because the male had long braids, but they're Caribbean. And I heard she had two daughters, and I thought this was one of them. Turns out she has two daughters and a son. People are offended by being misgendered, whether they are a part of this community or generally speaking. And I guess I can understand that. What I think is challenging and a thing for us to overcome as a society is that the reason we need to have an understanding of a gender of a person is because we want to behave toward them in a particular kind of way. And I think that as we progress and move away of treating men in this particular way and treating women in this other particular way, it will matter less, but we need to put people in a particular category so we know how to behave toward them. And I'm not sure that that's not a part of what the problem is that we should be behaving toward everyone in an equal type of way. And I think we've got quite a ways to go in human society before we can achieve that. But I think that that's where the crux of some of this confusion comes from and some of this uncomfortableness comes from, with people needing to know exactly, okay, are you male? Are you female? Should I behave in this way? Should I behave in this other way?
Are
I think that's a really great point, Ken. I would just add that I think even though it's uncomfortable to talk about sometimes, I think sexuality is an important part of that too.
Mm.
Oftentimes we're asking ourselves, should I be sexually attracted to this person or
Mm.
not? Right? And knowing their gender is important for a lot of
Mm.
us.
Yeah.
let's explain that
The Kinsey scale.
there you go. There you go.
I have a feeling that Wesley might be, if I'm not saying your name right, is it Wesley?
It is, yeah, yeah, thank you.
Quite possibly familiar with the Kinsey scale. And I was
Sure.
talking to Darnell about it, and I so long since I've actually read any research. I only know what I remember from just, comment absorption from it. But one of the things I was explaining to him is that I, as a gay man, I don't really know a lot about the transgender issues as they exist for transgender men and women within our community. I don't really know. I don't know a lot about the issues that face lesbians, for example. I had a hard enough time with my own gay man situation. I don't have a lot of knowledge about what goes on that side. But what I did say is that I am aware that human sexuality, based on the research done by Kinsey, is understood to lie on this scale. That some people are all the way to one direction, 100% completely straight, attracted to women. That is it. Or I should say, attracted to the opposite sex. And then there are some all the way on the other end who are attracted to the same sex. But within that line, all the way down that line, there are some people that lie a little bit here, a little bit over there, and are not so defined, and that their attraction and sexuality um, is a bit fluid. Some are right in the middle, and I was discussing with him the idea of like when I came out in the '90s, being bisexual was just a stopway on the way to being gay because it was easier to tell. At least we thought it was easier to tell people that I was bisexual than just to say that I was gay. But the joke was everybody that I said I was gay to, nobody was surprised. Not a single person was surprised when I actually told them that I was gay. So this little journey I took on the way, to bisexuality was kind of unnecessary. But I have to imagine that if that is the case for human sexuality and attractiveness, then somehow how is that not possible for sexual identity? How is that not a possibility with all of the things that exist on the planet? How is that not also a possibility? And I just don't know more than that, but it just seems logical to me that that is the case.
Mhm.
Now, the reason why I wanted you to explain that, as somebody who, if we were talking about that scale, I'm that 5 or 10% all the way on the other side. So it's not even part of my psyche to understand attractiveness to the same gender. But when you explain that to me, that has been my life experience, where I have, in the people that I've met, um, especially with you being in my life as long as you have, I've been very respectful and defensive of people who are uh, unkind toward uh, homosexual people.
Mm.
That and I remember when I moved to Florida, it was a conservative person who was telling me very bad things about gay people, and I defended the gay community, and I told him, I said, well, they have to be wired like that. It's not that this is a choice. This is just who they are. And I just knew that I had I was going to catch him. I had the way to get him. And I said, well, could you at all ever have sex with a man? And without pause, without ponder, he was like, yeah. That's because I'm thinking completely binary again. I'm
Yeah.
thinking is or ain't. And then the more people I began to meet and talk to as I moved around the country, it's like more people are more in that middle portion than on either end. In fact, dare I say, most people, if you get to know them, are somewhere on that scale. So I think it's an issue of perhaps, and I'll ask Dr. Phelps, is the activism move becoming part of why people don't understand, because it's this hard stance and expectation that people should already know, already process, already identify something that is generally foreign, because Kenneth has a lifestyle different from mine, but our ages make some things very common. So when I ask him, things, okay, well, what's going on in this community? How do I address it? There's some things that he thinks like me on because of our ages. Like, where I was saying in the 80s and 90s, this breadth of identity was just not in the game. So is it the activism that is the activism part of the problem? I ask you.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I really like this idea of thinking about gender on a spectrum, sort of like the Kinsey scale. And we have we have the Kinsey scale very well represented on our call today. So, Kinsey scale was from 0 to 6. So 0 was completely heterosexual, 6 is completely homosexual, and then there are these kind of gradations in the middle. So Darnell, I guess you would be sort of a 0. Ken, I'm gonna guess you're a 5 or a 6, maybe. I'm probably like a 2, 2 or a 3. So we have it well represented. I like the idea of thinking about gender along that same kind of spectrum. So if we think about gender on a spectrum, it gives us more room to think about people's identities and the way they construct their identities and the way they think about their own gender, even if it doesn't appear a certain way to us. So if we misgender someone because we look at their physical characteristics, we look at their phenotype and we think woman and we call them ma'am and they say, yeah, I'm a man, you can call me sir. We can have room for that if we think about this as a spectrum. Okay, well, here's someone who identifies as a man, who uses he, him pronouns, but also happens to have a body type that I might associate with femininity. But I have intellectual space now to recognize this person as a man because I see gender as a spectrum. So I like that idea. I think Ken is onto something there. I like that.
You
Okay,
know, and
we are.
I long
What?
before
Let me do one thing, please. Um, we're actually coming to close our last minute, and what I really didn't think it was going to go this long, and what I would much rather do is that we get to continue this point because it's better than I thought it was. So can we close this and do maybe a part two immediately after, so Kenneth can we start off with you on your point? Is that cool, Kenneth?
sure,
All
Yeah,
right,
that
yeah, that
works
cool.
for
sounds
me.
good.
So I'm going to end the recording. This will be part one, and then we'll just pick up part two. So I don't know if we have to go out and go back in, but just the same ID, same everything, and then we'll pick right back up with you, Kenny.
Okay,
Okay.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
thanks.